Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
You know, we talk on this program a lot about the hot spots around the world, and we're usually involved in all of them. Yeah. If there's one going on, we feel left out if we're not there, so we end up getting in there. Well, we have another hot spot. I mean, it was a cool spot there for a while. We didn't pay much attention to it. But all of a sudden, there's a hot spot in the Persian Gulf. And it's between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, nobody had anticipated this coming up. And it's a serious thing. I mean, Saudi Arabia broke relations along with 3 other Arab countries. They're put on sanctions, blockade. They can't get any food in. And, you know, all of a sudden, it's a big deal. But one thing that in looking into this that I found sort of fascinating was 2 or 3 weeks before anybody even was thinking about this, Congress was busy passing a law, getting prepared to put on sanctions against Qatar. So there must have been some thought about it, but all of a sudden it's clear blue. To me, it looks like who knows what will happen. I mean, the Iranians are sending two warships over to Oman, which is right in the neighborhood. The people in Qatar, although they're rather rich, they're the richest per capita country in the world, and they were getting all their food over trucks from Saudi Arabia, but they closed that all down. But Iran came to the rescue, and they're shipping in food and helping them out. So that really sets the stage. Who's on whose side? And now the people who have been after the Iranians for a long time will have more ammunition. Matter of fact, this essentially started when Trump started talking, you know, about those bad Iranians. And so this to me is fascinating because it involves national defense and it involves our militarism, and it involves some of our investments. So this was something I just don't think there was a whole lot written about this in the last 2 or 3 months about something like this happening.
Yeah, I think this mini explosion was a surprise, at least to most people, maybe not to everyone. As you say, Congress seemed to know something about it, but it was, in a way, on the surface, it doesn't pass the laugh test because Saudi Arabia is breaking ties with Qatar over its support for terrorism and its interference in the internal affairs of other countries. You know, Saudi Arabia here is the #1 exporter of terrorism in the world, who's been involved in Syria for how many years, who's involved in bombing Yemen back to the Stone Age. So it really is like the pot calling the kettle black. But deeper down, there are more geopolitical reasons, I think, for the split. It's not, it comes to mind the scene in the great film Casablanca where he says, "There's gambling going on here, and you're earning, sir." It reminds you of that. But deeper, I think there are the geopolitics, the fact that Qatar shares a natural gas field with Iran. I think they have ties because of trade that they're hesitant to break. And I think if the U.S. and Saudi Arabia thought they were going to break these ties between the two by doing this, I think it's backfired spectacularly.
But if there was ever a situation that our administration, our government, our people should think, maybe this is a good one not to get in the middle of. Because, the other day, once this happened, Tillerson and our Pentagon as well, they spoke out and they said, hey, this isn't a very good idea. This is not going to help. Do you know that we have a big base over there? We have 11,000 troops in this little country. It's the biggest air base. It services all our bombing and things going on in that whole region. And you're up there stirring up trouble. And Trump, of course, 1 hour later said, yeah, these people are bad people. They're supporters of terrorism. And Trump had just recently was in Saudi Arabia and praising, the Saudi kingdoms, and which meant that he was anti the Iranians. And here they are. So, but in our own administration, within an hour, we get 2 messages if you're trying to figure out which is which. So tell me, is this planned? Is this a strategy, or is this something else?
Well, I love the fact that the White House spokesman said after these two apparently conflicting messages, said, no, they're not conflicting after all. They just sound that way. They just sound conflicting. But, under the surface, there's also the tension between the Muslim Brotherhood and the Saudi Kingdom. The Muslim Brotherhood is opposed to the idea of hereditary passage of power. And so there are these kinds of issues that are difficult for us to understand. They're not part of our world. But I think those are all under the surface. And that explains Turkey's involvement, because Turkey is close to the Muslim Brotherhood. And they, as of 2014, have a military base in Qatar as well. And they just passed legislation to add another 3,000 Turkish troops onto that little tiny island. So,
of course, I think everybody would be better off the least involved they are in other people's affairs. But when it comes to Turkey and other countries, it's in their backyard. It's a part of it would be what it might be good for us doesn't mean that it would be absolutely the best thing for Turkey. But it is all of a sudden you're seeing them line up. There were 3 or 4 other Gulf states supported Saudi Arabia on this, and then all of a sudden, who's going to support and who's going to be on the side of the Iranians, and this could. This could escalate like so many of them are escalating. I mean, things are really in shambles. The last thing this country, our country, needs is another one. When you look at the wonderful success in Syria, they might claim that Ukraine is a wonderful success, but I don't believe that. They might pretend that there's a success in Afghanistan. Oh, but we need 10,000 more troops, and it's on and on. Everything they touch becomes shambles, but it's always fighting terrorism. And yet here we are on the side of the country that I believe if people were objective, they'd have to say that the promoters of the most amount of terrorism probably would be the Saudis, because we helped them along on that, years ago. And did you see where the Iranians are saying that they have proof that we actually literally support ISIS? Of course, we've said that on this air too, because in one place they might be, the other place they were saying we're after ISIS, the other place they're helping ISIS. So I wouldn't be surprised that they do have some more evidence, but that doesn't solve our problem. I mean, we're in this flip-flop situation where nobody can quite comprehend the foreign policy, other than the fact that no matter how you use interventionism allows flexibility, which some people think is very good. But it also means on again, off again, do one thing, say one thing, and policy is this, 1 hour later, change it, and, mass confusion. So I think it's going to remain confused, but, the fact that this is an attack as much on Iran as anything.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's the intention. I think it's more than just coincidental that this break came just a couple of days, literally, after Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia. We suspect that he listens to the last person he spoke with the most, and so that might explain some of this. But, again, as we said when we started, if this was intended to put a division between Qatar and Iran, it's absolutely backfired. It's had the opposite effect. As you point out, Iran is sending food. Iran probably looks at this as a great bonus. This is a geostrategic opportunity for them to get closer to Qatar. They share this oil field. They share ties. The Qatar has been close to the Houthis in Yemen as well. So this may be shifting things and unintended consequences of really what you say is the Trump administration's blundering into this. If there's ever a case for non-interventionism, this is a good one.
A lot of people like to dissect out Trump's tweets. And of course, he's in one, and I've read somebody else's opinion about this. I didn't read all his tweets. They said that he wants to take credit for this. He went in there and he stood up for the Sunni nationalists, and those are the good guys. And he has to be against the terrorists, and the terrorists are all come from Iran. And of course, the facts are quite a bit different than that, because the ISIS people are attacking Iran now. So that's fictitious, and I would think that if that could possibly be so, but I think a president making tweets can precipitate events. But just like I pointed out at the beginning, that there might have been some plans laid in our U.S. Congress because the pro-Saudi and pro-Israeli people had this bill, this legislation going through, and that's been a couple weeks before this story broke.
Yeah, it is very coincidental. But, you know, someone speculated, maybe even more than speculation, that, you know, Trump took credit for this before he may have actually known that we have a major base there and, you know, over $1 billion worth of Qatari investment in the United States. He may have really blundered into something they didn't understand. And, you know, it's interesting. I was in Washington last week and I spoke to a fellow who's a high-ranking Pentagon guy, and he said he's never seen anything like this. Literally, the second and third tier of political appointees are gone. There's nobody there. And you have holdovers. I'm sure it's the same in state. Assistant secretary and deputy assistant secretaries, all these positions are empty. You've got a lot of hangers on. I'm wondering, not that we're endorsing putting a lot more people into government service, but it may explain some of this confusion of policy.
Now, are these people that automatically leave with each administration, or were these professional people that usually go from one administration to the next?
Yeah, there are a couple of layers of political appointees that go into assistant secretary, deputy assistant secretary. Those all go through the Senate. Those are all appointed positions. And so he just simply hasn't put anyone up for these positions. So that might explain if he has a policy, which I think we'd suspect that he doesn't really have an operating philosophy or policy. But if he did, he'd have no one to carry it out anyway.
It'll be interesting to see exactly where the military-industrial complex is. Well, I guess Tillerson is speaking for them more than others because, you know, he wants to protect the base and he wants to protect contracts. How many contracts are there other than military contracts? You know, there's probably a lot of military contracts. So it probably doesn't hurt the military-industrial complex one bit.
No, not at all. And, you know, Qatar, they're no dummies either. They hired a high-powered PR firm. You probably saw that in Washington. That's what you do when you get in trouble.
Is that
Ashcroft.
Right?
John Ashcroft will personally take charge of this. They're paying him $2.5 million in an emergency contract. This is, I think, what maybe some of the viewers don't understand, and we've seen it when you were there. This is really what drives policy in Washington.
Yeah, no, and he will have a lot of people behind him that he'll be representing. So it'll be interesting to just see how he handles it, because this is getting awfully close to the deep state. You know, it's the leaking out of the deep state, revealing what's really happening. But you wonder about. I imagine, just like every human organization, the deep state is not monolithic. It's not perfect. It's going to go back and forth, and different things happen will literally even Trump's been influenced by it. You know, when he changes his position on NATO. But this will be interesting to see what evolves. But I would still maintain that this is a dangerous situation, because you don't know exactly what will happen. And you know, with warships being there, where does the United States go? We've committed to the Saudis. You know, and Trump has been very, very blunt on that. So that means we are close allies against the Yemenis. You know, the war against Yemen, and of course that means that he has to be emphatically opposed to Iran, because that represents the Sunni Shia, Persian Arab conflicts that have gone on for a long time. And then it's the control of oil too, oil and gas, like you mentioned. In that little country, they have some oil and gas.
Yeah, they do. But, you know, I think this sort of blundering into this could be dangerous, you know, if you want to maintain the global empire. Because what's going to happen to this base if they push the Qatar government their backs to the wall and they say, okay, you guys, you got to get out of here? We certainly can't send it back to Saudi Arabia, because remember what happened last time. We moved it out of there because of what happened last time, you know.
Yeah, well, it probably wouldn't make much sense putting it in Iraq and Afghanistan. But when you look at that map, did we put our map up?
No,
yeah,
we
put up our map, and we can show where this, it's really, you know, see right in the center there. And then, of course, straight north is Iran.
Yeah,
and so it's a key location, and it might be, you know, the key geopolitical politically a spot for our biggest air base for that reason. It's not working well. I have a suggestion. Let's move it back to the United States. Bring the jobs home.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
But reduce them. Well, I think there are 1,100 airplanes stationed there. And the other thing impressed, I think, was every 10 minutes, 7 days out of the week, 24 hours a day, a plane either lands or takes off.
Wow.
I mean, that's a lot of them. And nobody even knows we're at war. And these are warplanes. And as long as they can control the media and what's going on, they keep doing this. But that's a lot of. I wonder. How much fossil fuels are being burned with all those planes in and out of there. And there's probably other countries' airplanes beside ours. That's a lot of energy being burned up for what? Who knows what? It's all world empire. That's why we're involved. There would be a lot of these problems if we weren't there. They've been there for a long time, but the scope would be so much smaller. There would be a lot less incentive for Russia to be so engaged if they weren't worrying about being surrounded by our military bases. So this is something that would be much, much better off without us there. No, we didn't start every single battle over there and every single skirmish and the religious wars and all these problems, but we've been engaged. Our last 100 years of engagement over there hasn't been good. So how would you summarize this, and what do you think we should be looking for?
I think the Trump administration is about to get a very hard lesson in the downfalls of interventionism in the Persian Gulf now. I think that's what's come on the horizon.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I wouldn't disagree with that, because that's sort of the theme of our program. Interventionism doesn't work well. We should have hands off internationally, hands off the economy, and hands off our personal lives. That would go a long way for developing a world where we could set a standard, and we could look, in our terms, an exceptional nation where people would want to emulate what we do. But to be involved in everything and looking at this, all of a sudden perking up, and here several weeks before we were already planning on putting on the sanction in the Carter. So I would say that what we should do is keep an eye on this. Hope we're completely wrong about being a little bit concerned, but who knows? All these places are hot spots. There's plenty of them over there, and it's always a drain. It's always a drain financially, and this country is suffering. All that we have done in developing, the greatest development we've had in many decades, especially in the last 10, has been debt. And believe me, debt will bury us all if we're not careful, because people will finally reject our policies. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.